think what Sophie Cunningham is saying here about the Indiana Fever offense should be obvious. This should be how it is. If you're a Caitlin Clark, if you're a LeBron James, your system should, your basketball offensive system should run through that superstar.
So now Sophie Cunningham is cast as the villain. The WNBA reportedly disciplined her for saying something that, in all honesty, every fan was already aware of. The Fever's offense is built around Caitlin Clark, and that simple truth somehow ignited a social media firestorm. Do you believe Sophie was out of line for her public remarks, or just courageous enough to finally voice the truth? Okay, let's unpack this, as the reaction to Sophie Cunningham's comments has been utterly absurd.
And Sophie Cunningham has come out and said such, and says that it was running through her. I guess when she was on the court. Now, we saw a few times where it looked like it was actually running through her. But we also saw times where it looked like it absolutely was not. She was playing off the ball way too much. But what has surprised me about these comments is Sophie Cunningham is getting attacked.
Sophie Cunningham is facing intense criticism. She insulted no one and leaked no team secrets. She simply stated the Fever's offensive system runs through Caitlin Clark, as it should. This isn't an insult, it's basketball 101. Yet, in the current WNBA, stating the obvious can get you reprimanded. Here's the context. On her podcast,
500.
Yep. But
is that fair to say?
Yes, but I think that the reason behind that is because those types of athletes, they get to come into an organization, they have the green light, and they can do whatever they want. Where that is very rare to get drafted and be able to control the whole system.
Right. Was CC making decisions like...
Yeah.
With it, yeah.
As she should.
No way.
As she should, but I also think that they go ahead.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that. She's just young. I just didn't think that.
But when you have a generational talent like that, she should have a lot to say of the system. I also think when you
Her point was straightforward. A talent of that caliber should have input on the system. That's all she said, and then chaos erupted. Fans began arguing. Reporters took the quote out of context, and the league was apparently displeased. Sources close to the Fever say league officials contacted Sophie, reminding her about media discipline and keeping team discussions private. In other words, quit talking about Caitlin Clark on your podcast. So,
because we saw what happened, the one game where I'll say you're pretty confident that this was happening was second half of Atlanta, where Caitlin Clark kind of got into it with Stephanie White at halftime, and they come out in the second half. Tash Howard's benched for a lot of it. Kelsey Mitchell gets benched for a good bit of it, and they really go on their huge run where they go from losing at halftime to winning by 20.
Let's be real. Sophie was just pointing out what was plain to see all season. With Clark handling the ball, the Fever looked dynamic. Without her, it was like 5 individuals running 5 separate plays. But this is the part that truly matters. Sophie wasn't an outsider looking in. She was behind those closed doors. She was the one who witnessed the team's actual operations. If anyone is qualified to discuss how the offense functions, it's her. But the WNBA dislikes unapproved player commentary. They prefer control. They prefer a polished image. No complicated quotes. No candid podcast moments. And Sophie, she refuses to play that game. She has always been candid. Remember when she was the sole Fever player to physically defend Caitlin Clark after a hard foul? Yep, while others hesitated, Sophie confronted people, and that explains exactly why she's so polarizing. She competes with passion, speaks with candor, and doesn't sanitize her words for others' comfort. But here is the reality. If this league genuinely desires personalities and marketability, they ought to thank her, not reprimand her. Because let's be clear, the WNBA's current growth isn't from sterile press conferences. It's from players speaking their minds like Clark, like Sophie, like Angel Reese, like Aja Wilson. Fans are engaged by the stories, not just the box scores. So Sophie states one factual line, and the league reacts as if she leaked state secret. Meanwhile, the Fever's whole strategy is essentially to give the ball to Clark, but there's a larger issue here. It exposes the tension inside Indiana's locker room that fans noticed all season, because when Sophie claimed the system should be built around Caitlin, it wasn't just an observation, it was an indirect critique of how often that wasn't the case. We all saw it. Possessions where Clark was stationed in the corner as someone else dribbled out the clock. That isn't a strategy, it's disorganization. And the fault isn't on Sophie for seeing it, it's on the coaches for pretending it works. Yet she's the one told to stay silent. The funny thing is, even her online defenders started joking she needs a lawyer for her next podcast. That's how strange this became, because everyone knows Sophie was correct, but they are hesitant to acknowledge the team's ongoing issues with running through Clark. It's simpler to label her too loud than to face a flawed system. The irony is, the Fever is in desperate need of voices like hers in their locker room. She's among the few players displaying passion when things aren't going well. She is the one ready to critique lazy rotations, poor box outs, and communication breakdowns. That is leadership, just not the version the league promotes on social media. But this is where the story shifts from amusing to troubling. Reportedly, some in the WNBA front office believe Sophie's remarks damage organizational cohesion. Really? What is cohesive about feigning perfection? If Clark's talent is the cornerstone of the Fever's future, then building around her is not controversial. It's basic logic. You don't win games by sidelining your top player. You don't expand a league by muzzling players who state facts. And you certainly don't warn Sophie Cunningham for saying what fans and experts have demanded all year. Give Clark the ball and let her create. Now we should discuss why Sophie's comments struck a chord and why the league's response reveals more about them than her. Because honestly, Sophie Cunningham didn't expose the Fever. She exposed the WNBA's fixation on narrative control. The league wants a bigger audience, but it also wants every comment sanitized and vetted like it's a corporate statement. And that is precisely why players like Caitlin Clark became so popular initially. She doesn't talk like a PR specialist, she talks like a genuine person. Sophie is the same. She speaks like a veteran player who's seen it all. The victories, the fouls, the media narrative. She's willing to voice the unspoken truth. And that's what the league requires, authenticity. But instead of welcoming it, the WNBA panicked. They saw a single clip, a few social media outcries, and suddenly Sophie is too frank, yet they'll eagerly promote drama when it boosts numbers. When Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark have a moment, it's called passion. When Sophie calls Clark a generational talent, it's suddenly a problem. It makes no sense. The reality is, Sophie's podcast remarks didn't only affect fans, they unsettled people within the organization, because her subtext pointed to a larger issue. The Fever's internal leadership is still undefined. Who is leading, and who is following? Because if the offense is supposed to run through Clark, as everyone agrees, why did it fail to do so consistently all season? That is the unanswerable question. Even coach Stephanie White's post-game pressers felt guarded all year. She'd say things like, "We're balancing everyone's roles." Translation, "We're still trying to build around Caitlin," without it seeming like it's only about Caitlin. But that's the issue. This is Caitlin's team. That's an undisputed fact. Even the sponsors know it. The Fever's merchandise revenue, ticket sales, and media coverage are all centered on her. Pretending the court is a democracy just confuses the situation for everyone, the players included. And that's why Sophie's comments landed with such force. She articulated what the coaching staff couldn't. She essentially said to give Caitlin the freedom and have the team work around her. It is not complex, it is simply basketball. But rather than praise her candor, the WNBA treated it as a PR crisis. You know what is wild? Sophie wasn't even being critical. She was being complimentary. She compared Caitlin Clark to LeBron James. That is among the highest compliments a player can receive, and still people were upset. Fans claimed she was riding coattails. Others alleged she was seeking attention. But consider this, if she had said the same thing about Aja Wilson or Breanna Stewart, would there have been any outrage? Unlikely, because this issue isn't truly about Sophie. It's about Caitlin Clark and how any statement with her name becomes a controversy. The league is aware Clark drives engagement. That's why they aim to manage the dialogue, but they can't. Because players like Sophie constantly remind us that Clark's presence alters the dynamic. And honestly, that reality makes some people uneasy. Because once you acknowledge Clark's influence, you also acknowledge the WNBA's success now hinges on one player. That is a difficult reality for some long-serving insiders to accept. Now for the craziest part. Sophie is standing her ground. Following the backlash, she posted a concise tweet. Nothing but love. Just facts. That's all. Brief, direct, and self-assured. And frankly, it encapsulates her perfectly. Sophie isn't intimidated by conflict. She's been heckled since her college days. She has been called every insult imaginable, but she consistently shows up, prepared to play, and prepared to back her teammates, including Caitlin Clark. Think back to earlier this season, when Clark was knocked down and nobody reacted. Sophie was the sole player to intervene. That's the distinction between her and many in the league. She doesn't hide behind a veil of professionalism. She defends her own. So watching her be portrayed as the problem for being honest is truly laughable. And it's not only fans who see it. Journalists are also starting to question it. Multiple WNBA insiders have privately stated the league's reaction to Sophie's remarks was excessive and that her words did not breach any media policy. So what was the warning for? She made the league uncomfortable, and that is precisely why her voice is important. When you receive media warnings for speaking the truth, it shows you're touching a sensitive nerve. But here's the kicker. Caitlin Clark herself reportedly had no issue with Sophie's comments. According to team sources, Clark found the whole situation amusing, saying something like, "That's just Sophie being Sophie." That is telling. Clark was not offended. The team did not fall apart. The only ones in a frenzy were those trying too hard to protect the league's pristine image. So this is the irony. The WNBA aims to expand its viewership, yet it consistently penalizes the very personalities who make fans invest. Sophie is candid, confident, and fearless, the type of player who ignites discussion and generates engagement. But rather than championing that, they prefer quiet. Meanwhile, fans are over the scripted answers and generic sound bites. They crave authentic discussion, which Sophie provides. So if the league's objective is sustained growth, it should reconsider who it is warning, because players like Sophie are why people outside Indiana even know about the Fever. Her statement didn't harm the WNBA, it strengthened it. It served as a reminder that Caitlin Clark is not just another player. She is the player, the one the offense, the team, and likely the entire league should be centered on. And truthfully, deep down, even her detractors know Sophie was correct. They just dislike that she said it publicly, because when you state a truth openly, it makes people address the politics happening behind closed doors. That's what Sophie accomplished, and that's why the WNBA panicked. She didn't just compliment Caitlin Clark, she revealed the extent of the league's control over players who dare to speak freely. And that is the true story. Sophie Cunningham wasn't warned for being disrespectful. She was warned for going off script. And if that's the league's current position, suppressing honesty, then perhaps Sophie isn't the one who needs to change. Perhaps the system does, because this is the truth. Stars like Caitlin Clark do not flourish in a quiet environment. They flourish with authenticity. They build a fan base by being unapologetically real. So if the WNBA genuinely wants to expand, it must allow players like Sophie to express their views, even when it's untidy, even when it's direct, even when it generates headlines. That is how authentic sports leagues grow. You cannot generate global interest in a league while treating every frank opinion as a major offense. And just now, Sophie Cunningham showed everyone what true competition and genuine honesty are all about. So yes, the WNBA can issue all the warnings it wants, but the fans are paying attention because she is not wrong. She simply voiced what everyone else was too hesitant to acknowledge. The Indiana Fever's offense is Caitlin Clark's, and the WNBA's future likely is as well. So what's your take? Was Sophie out of line, or was she just saying what had to be said? Leave your opinion below, click the like button, and subscribe for more no-nonsense WNBA analysis, because if the league continues to warn players for being truthful, Sophie Cunningham may soon be the last truly honest voice in the sport.